Alright, welcome back to Majesty. So, today's lecture we're going to look at the core loop as well as, some interesting aspects. I looked through several of the quests and I decided to go with urban renewal here.
Tell our sovereign the news? Majesty, I have good news and bad. The good news is your uncle died. No, that won't do. Ahem. My liege, your late uncle has bequeathed you a town of sorts. Maybe more positive. It pleases me to inform you that you've been granted a tremendous opportunity. You can be the first Ardanian sovereign to give the word slum a good name. Well, that won't work either. It's no use. Majesty, look out the window. Rogues, elves, and debauchery as far as the eye can see. It's all yours, no thanks to your dead uncle. Think you can clean up that mess?
So, I felt like this was a pretty good show of how this game sometimes doesn't take itself too seriously and is a little bit silly. But yeah, so this one, the objective is to destroy basically all of the enemy adventurers and their buildings. And obviously you can't build things you're trying to destroy. So, I'm going to hold shift and do the less than sign over and over and over until it gets down to a crawl. It's the closest to pausing I can get. But yeah, so the core loop of this game is partially interesting for a pretty interesting, well, I just said interesting too much. The core loop has quirks in that it's not just the game you're playing. It's a type of asymmetrical game, really. At its core, it is an asymmetrical game where one player, i.e. you, are playing a city building / management / economics game, whereas the AI is playing an RPG, or rather playing more like a CRPG or a tactics game or something like that. Like the real-time strategy aspect of the game is actually being played by the computer, which is quite interesting. Like it's very, very interesting. So
Sovereign,
this is an example of one of the more complex quest ideas, in that like they're using the same resources that normally you would be building as part of the management layer to actually create objectives. So the Rogues Guilds and Elven Bungalows are a third party to the monsters. So the AI is still playing the RPG, just with a faction in addition to yours, as well as with the monsters. So there's a lot of things that make it pretty interesting, really. Now, the economic simulation is both surprisingly simple and surprisingly deep. The fact that you can actually have your tax collectors be kind of micromanaged to only go for large payouts. I'll get to the magic star in a second. And then, only come back with fat stacks of gold. Stuff like that. It's interesting.
Your marketplace now serves you better.
Upgrade economy. Yeah, as you can see, I slowed it down a lot. But yeah, so at the heart of the game, the player's core experience is just building buildings, watching their economy, and managing heroes and spells to try to accomplish whatever goal. Which, again, the change between different quests and some of the more interesting ones that use, normal assets to... I kind of hope the rogues and elves come and help me to try to get this first building built. The first guild being built is kind of really important, because otherwise I have no way of actually defending myself.
Sovereign, a building
Good times.
has been upgraded.
Actually, I could probably build a... Oh yeah, there's also the embassy available in this particular... And the mausoleum, yeah. So this is like all of the different things available. And unlike in Warcraft or whatever, the peasants don't fight back. They just die. Good times. So the core experience is this urban planning and economic simulation. And that in and of itself makes for potentially interesting gameplay, as many other simulation games like SimCity have shown. Like, just managing your metropolis as it grows and develops can be a very compelling game on its own, and often is in the management space. And RPGs have that inherent endorphin rush as your characters get stronger and stronger and higher level. And since the AI playing the RPG getting stronger helps you in your management game, it actually creates a very compelling core loop.
Our kingdom is to prosper, it needs more heroes.
And it also, of course, adds depth, because like a management game can only be so deep before it kind of gets automatic. Like there's a lot of ways that you can play Civ, or I'm just gonna turn this down so he doesn't die with all of his gold, all the gold that he brought or is bringing. But games like Civ, sometimes they just kind of end up being solved, sort of like a puzzle. And there's just an objectively best path to developing your city in any given scenario that results in, having a pretty consistent system of play where you start off building X, and then you build Y, and then you build Z, and you worry about problem here, there, that, whatever. And this does somewhat suffer from that, because since you have very little direct impact on the actual RPG side of things, you end up with kind of like, okay, I need to build up my economy, and then I build these particular guilds in this particular order. And I've noticed that, part of the problem with the game is also that it really does promote building the tougher, less easily killed heroes or adventurers, rather than building, a wide variety based on whatever particular situation you're in. But, altogether, the game is compelling for its own reasons. And the biggest one is this whole concept that there's this asymmetrical play between the AI playing the RPG. Man, my peasants are just getting nuked constantly. But between the AI playing the RPG and the actual player playing the management game, there's a little bit of a disconnect between, what could be and what is. So, for a game made in 2000, it's very, very interesting. But as you play more and more, you kind of get used to prioritizing certain things, like getting your marketplaces upgraded. The economy, having it so that you can collect taxes from all the different types of buildings, turn off collecting taxes to keep your tax collector from running off super far away from your castle and dying, etc., so forth and so on and whatnot.
In the name of the sovereign.
There's a lot of room for improvement, but that's kind of true of any game made in the 90s or early 2000s. And the core loop, I feel like, is very compelling for a lot of reasons. and with some improvements, could be so much more. Which is why the second game project I intend to work on after I finish Gears of Conquest is actually a spiritual successor to this game.
I'm out of here.
And I feel like part of what's going to help me with that project... Wait. Is this red peasant going to come help me build the building that's going to help me destroy the red buildings? That's an interesting interaction. That would be a very interesting interaction. Or is he just walking by? No, looks like he's just walking by. In any case, so what I think is going to help create a more successful expansion of this concept, this core loop, and add depth not just to, you know, the early game of which of the most important buildings do you prioritize first. For example, you know, obviously upgrading the marketplace is increasing the money I generate, but the money I generate is meaningless if I can't get another building built, and since I didn't build anything defensive, I have nothing to spend money on because my peasants die as soon as they walk out of the castle. So, that's one problem. Another problem is there really isn't an end game, because by the time you're actually building Palace level 3 and the higher level buildings and whatnot, you don't really care anymore, because either you've basically already lost or you've basically already won because you have a bunch of really high level heroes walking around and killing everything. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think part of the way I'm going to handle that, and don't worry if you're subscribed to the channel and interested in the videos mostly out of curiosity for Gears of Conquest and whatnot, I am 100% focusing on that game. This is just me musing and kicking around ideas for the second project in however many years it takes for me to finish Gears of Conquest. But also leave a comment if you have a suggestion, thought, or otherwise in regards to a spiritual successor for Majesty that I perhaps do not mention or touch on. But the focus, I feel like, on development was a little too much on the real-time strategy aspect of the game, which is especially evident with the sequel. Majesty 2 is more of an RTS, and it doesn't have as much of this, this concept of the AI playing the RPG and playing it pretty poorly, while you play this RTS where you have very little micromanagement, which is kind of a staple, especially of high-level play in RTSs. Like if you've ever watched professional StarCraft players, they have like insane, over 100 actions per whatever, blah 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 blah. Like they can micromanage massive armies very easily. But that's not really the focus of this game. So I feel like having it be a real-time strategy game first and a management game second, like they did with Majesty 2, is a mistake. I think it's more compelling to focus on better developing the RPG systems for the AI, as well as further developing the management systems for the player. And part of the best way to approach that, I think, would be putting more emphasis on a wider variety of choices. A great example is the temples. The fact that if you build some of the temples, other temples become unavailable. So you have to pick one path or the other. But one of the problems with that is there is always going to be an objectively better building. Like, if you build one and can't then build the other, and you have to make that decision, the most optimal path is to figure out which is the better building, and then just always build that. So there would need to be more nuance to the decision, rather than just, this gives you access to X, and that gives you access to Y, which allows you to just weigh the two choices against each other to clearly come out to, okay, these adventurers are always going to be stronger than those adventurers. So, a lot more depth and nuance to the character, the character, facets, and the character development of the AI adventurers, heroes, whatever you want to call them, would lead to much deeper and more compelling gameplay, man. That barracks is still nowhere close to being finished. Every time they get some work done, the peasants get killed, and then the ratmen do some more damage to it. That's pretty bad. Whatever, it's fine. It gives me time to just talk instead of playing. And so one of the ways to improve would definitely be to give more meaningful choices. Because if there's always an objectively right answer, it's no longer a meaningful choice. So that would be one focus, is definitely creating more meaningful choices. Again, focusing on the management layer, the what do you build, how do you build it, where do you build it, whatever.
Your Highness, if our kingdom is to prosper, it needs more
I know,
heroes.
I'm trying to build the barracks. Lay off. Anyway, so the other major focus, I think, that would help really improve the game is a better developed progression system for the economy. Because as it is, you basically just build several marketplaces, build a blacksmith, build these specific economic buildings, and just wait for gold to be generated and for your tax collector to go around and gather it. And if the tax collector dies, which, is happening a lot if you happen to be struggling, then you just kind of lose. So, having a more interesting and, slightly more developed economy and economic generation system would be quite beneficial. And I know part of the reason why you only get one tax collector per level of castle and 3 or 4 heroes or adventurers or whatever per guild was the limitation back in 2000 to only be able to handle so many of these NPCs walking around, adventuring, buying things, deciding whether or not to run away, etc. And so the focus is, for the player's side of things, would definitely be mostly just meaningful decisions that the player can make, and a more nuanced and interesting economic side of the management. I think the building buildings to unlock particular whatever is pretty good. It can be better, I think, but I don't think changing that should be a focus. I have some ideas of that I've been kicking around. Again, I'm not actively spending much time thinking about my second game, since I am still, waist deep in my first game. But, some of the thoughts I've had over the years of, what would a Majesty-like game that I developed be like? And those are the two big ones. Those are the two big points from the player's perspective. Now, from the AI perspective, from the RPG mechanic perspective, I think there should be more difference between each individual adventure and more ways to interact with the adventurers. So, if you, for example, had specific traits that a individual adventurer might have. For example, just tossing one out. If an adventurer, say, is greedy and careless, or something like that, they would be more likely, or, you know, greedy and reckless, or whatever you want to call it, making them more likely to pursue bounties, even if the bounty is for something they just objectively cannot handle. And, you know, if a bunch of other heroes are also going and helping them fight things, that wouldn't be a problem. It might actually be a benefit, because you could rely on them more frequently and, you know, reliably pursuing your bounties. But it would also make you have to make a little bit more decision on where you place the bounties and how you place, like, okay, I know I have several greedy characters with other various quirks wandering around my city. So, do I put a bounty on this enemy or this threat or whatever that is likely to kill a few of them because they're just not powerful enough to deal with it yet? Or do I let the threat fester and get a little worse as they level up on other lesser bounties? And then you could also have, like, for example, just like a pious character, or a selfless character, or a hero complex character, or something like that, where maybe they go and they complete the bounty, but decide to not collect on the reward or the full reward. And so, from that perspective of giving more character development and more individuality to the different adventurers, would potentially create much more interesting moment-to-moment gameplay decisions. Likewise, the entire idea of, oh, I should also build something. I don't know. I'm definitely mostly musing and lecturing here. Let's pop up a mausoleum just to demonstrate, because I didn't have access to that building last time. But then, for the next point I'm about to make about, again, the RPG system that the AI is playing, let's look at the Magic Bazaar. So, with the marketplace, you can research healing potions, protection rings, and teleportation amulets, which your heroes can buy and then be a little stronger or have special abilities or whatever. You can build the blacksmith to upgrade their armor and weapons. You can build the magic or the mage guild to magically enchant their weapons, whatever. There's a lot of ways for the characters to progress for themselves. The Magic Bazaar is another one. The Magic Bazaar lets you research special potions. Tonic of Speed lets them move and I believe attack faster. The Firebomb, I think, is just a potion they can throw to do damage. Stuff like that. So, as you develop the Magic Bazaar, you gain access to more and more different potions, and you can research them to give the AI more things to spend gold on to get stronger. Now, one of the problems with this aspect to the AI system, to the RPG that the AI is playing, is that the AI is dumb. Because if they're going and dumping all of their money on consumables and never upgrading their weapons and armor at a blacksmith, you can end up with a high-level character that's too weak to actually handle high-level threats. And again, if we're developing the threat system better, if we're making them more quirky, or the adventurers more quirky, and adding complexity to all of that, then I feel like a good idea would be to give the option to do more than just gold rewards. Now, if, for example, you had the ability to have a blacksmith make a magic sword, just, again, throwing something out, and then you set that magic sword that you paid for, that you had the blacksmith make for you, as a reward for a quest, it could prompt the AI to come for the quest, and if it's a character that uses swords, for example, then it might further motivate that particular type of adventurer to pursue that particular quest if they don't already have an equal or better magic sword. Whereas others, like the adventurers that already have an equal or better magic sword, or adventurers who don't use swords at all, might still go after that quest to bring the sword back and sell it, re-entering the sword into the economy, so that then another adventurer that uses swords might be able to buy it. So it adds this entire tiered system to the economic layer by giving the ability to spend your gold on goods that you then either distribute to somebody who actively needs it and actively can better use it to empower them, or to re-enter into the economy. And since merchants buy low and sell high, it would actually buff the economy. It would boost the economy for a moment by giving the merchant more profit, which then in turn would result in more taxes. So it could potentially be an investment in the economy as well as a potential investment in a particular type or class or whatever of hero or adventurer, whatever you want to call them. So that basically sums up my thoughts on Majesty, and it's not a very complex game. The core loop is very simple. Build buildings, develop stable economy, hire adventurers, protect yourself, and hope that the adventurers do the things you need them to do, and if they don't, bribe them. It's very straightforward. It's a very simple concept, and I'm really surprised that no other game has really approached the idea. Maybe it's just because it didn't catch on, that much, and it wasn't a super popular game back in the day. So it didn't result in a lot of people being aware of its existence, much less being inspired by it. But I think if it were to be developed, if this game were being developed in this year or, in recent years, I think, based on what I see, it would have actually ended up more in like a roguelike kind of genre rather than a straight, this is an RTS with a quirk kind of mindset. And, I mean, it already has permadeath. The heroes permanently die. And they're a bit more than just the random, Protoss or Zerg unit or whatever that you hire or pay for by in something like StarCraft. So, compared to a stock standard RTS, it's very much a creature of its own. Anyway, Mausoleum is built. So the Mausoleum has a list of the dead, and I'm fairly certain you can resurrect. Stores dead heroes for resurrection and releases undead if destroyed. So the Mausoleum is something you can build preemptively, so that when the adventurers die, even if you don't have other ways of resurrecting them, I'm pretty sure it lets you resurrect them. Let's go ahead and attack this rogues guild with our warriors, and hope maybe one of them dies. And, yeah, we'll see if the rogues will... Oh man, they're fighting the tax collector, huh? That's not very cool. But we'll see if one of our warriors will come and fight these rogues. But yeah, again, face value, it's a very simple game. It's a very simple concept. And part of the problems it has may have just been limitations of the time. Just the fact that you could only have so many heroes. Although, I haven't decided yet whether a spiritual successor would need to be real-time to really get the same feel and the same like urgency of getting things done. Or if it would maybe be better if it was more turn-based, kind of like something like Battle Brothers or something like that, where you have this like management layer, and then, well, I guess technically only the battles in Battle Brothers is turn-based, but basically like having kind of like an overworld map sort of thing that shows all the threats to your city. And then when you go into your city, it being kind of like a turn-based thing where you build, maybe akin to Heroes of Might and Magic style. You go into your city, you build it, you develop it, you do things in different interfaces within the city, and then you go back to the overworld to see your heroes traveling around and dealing with potential threats. Or I say your heroes, the AI's adventurers, traveling around and dealing with different threats in real time.
I'm out of here.
But there's a whole lot of possibilities. The various things that could be done to create interesting and, you know, nuanced gameplay where this somewhat basic system is It's a fun game. It's really enjoyable. It's really unique, but there are a lot of ways I feel like it could be better. And yes, I know, I've basically just been rambling largely in circles, repeating the same points. I'm not going to make any excuses. I don't have that much to talk about. Like, that is all the depth the game offers. Build buildings, develop economy, hire heroes, and then accidentally complete objectives. I don't think it's very common for me to intentionally actually complete the objectives of a quest in this game. I think most of the time I'm just focused on developing my town and my economy, and just kind of hiring adventurers as they die or whatever. Yeah, I would really like for one of my heroes to die so that I can show off the museum. Also, the embassy. The embassy is an interesting building. I can't build it anywhere, it seems. Wait. Ooh, there. So, if I remember correctly, actually I could just click on the information. So, yes, the embassy will randomly recruit heroes, including heroes you don't have the buildings for.
I serve with pleasure.
And it can hold 2 heroes, but it will randomly recruit heroes until they die, and then it will randomly recruit a hero to replace it. And I feel like this functionality, specifically, just to go into one specific concept that I think would really be a great, not only help for the early game in a spiritual successor, but also just to make things kind of interesting, is if this functionality was built into your palace or your starting whatever, or if it was a very early building you could build. And the threat of your buildings being destroyed by monsters, I have yet to really contemplate how much that adds or retracts from the gameplay experience. Because, like, as you saw at the start of this quest, it was very difficult to get this first building built to actually be able to continue playing the game. And I feel like that's a flaw. there needs to be some systems that would allow you, if you're struggling very early on, to maybe get lucky and get a situation under control. Like, if it's RNG, like what hero stumbles into town and whether they rob your merchants blind or go out and deal with the threat for very cheap or for free. Like, it just, the difficulty curve is weird, and the fact that usually the heroes just kind of do whatever and end up accidentally bumbling into completing the mission, with the exception of a mission like this where you actively kind of have to tell them to destroy these red buildings. I don't think the AI actively does it on their own without you putting a bounty on them. But, yeah. I have been recording for over half an hour, and I don't really have much else to say. Definitely, if you have any thoughts, again, I haven't spent any time in development. Like, I have not brainstormed, really. I have not made notes and calculations and considerations of what objectively would be the best move, or what the full list of options for a spiritual successor would be. But if you have any thoughts, if you have experience with Majesty, or if just, watching the video I released yesterday and this video gave you any ideas of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if X, drop a comment. Because, like, it's fun just kind of thinking of a game like this that has such an interesting premise, and just being able to think of concepts that could potentially be used moving forward for future games to make them more interesting, unique experiences. Because at the end of the day, that's what game development really is. It's crafting an experience. Do I have to click open embassy? Cost $10.85. I guess that means it's recruiting a random hero for 1,000 gold. Okay. But yeah, just that's kind of what my goal is with these dev lectures, is to either, discuss concepts of games, to discuss, what was done successfully or maybe less than successfully in a particular game, and then, to just have a discussion about improvements and, where a game, in everyone's individual opinions, succeeded or failed or whatever. And yeah, the difference between this and A-modest analysis. A-modest analysis, I'm going to specifically stick to more modern games, like games that are actively in alpha, beta, whatever, as a way of giving feedback to modern developers. Whereas I think the Dev Lecture series is going to largely look at, games that are either abandoned, defunct, whatever, or, popular games like big AAA titles, just as a kind of thought, not even a thought experiment, just just kind of a subjective look. Like A-modest analysis, I'm going to try to stay as objective as possible, and hopefully have some interesting considerations for modern devs, modern indies specifically, to consider as they continue balancing, updating, whatever their game. Whereas, just in general, game development concepts, I think I'll explore in these dev lectures. But that has nothing to do specifically with this video or this game, so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, that has been Majesty. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have a good one.